Hugh Lynn Cayce on meditation. Harmon Bro once said to me that one of your most valuable personal contributions is enabling people to take their weaknesses and turn them into strengths. To me, that's a very great therapeutic talent. This healing matter is many-sided. Everyone has opportunities to function in a healing way, by smiling, by lending a word of encouragement, by bestowing the touch of a hand at the right time. All of these can function powerfully for healing. Not pity, but concern, encouragement and helpfulness, augmented by prayer, are powerful tools for healing. But also, there is the ability to listen. I think that a part of my success in counseling stems from schooling myself to be a good listener. I can also ask questions and draw people out. Listening is loving in a very healing fashion. In much of my counseling, I use the EDGAR CAYCE readings, the specific data from them, as a fulcrum, a point of moving, to arouse a person's interest in a particular line of thought. The people who come to me know that many people have been helped by these readings. The physical healings that resulted from the Cayce readings were absolutely amazing in their time, and they continue to be remarkably helpful today. At our clinic in Phoenix, Arizona, and elsewhere, hundreds of doctors are helping to establish therapeutic procedures and techniques based on the readings. Anyway, using portions of the readings in counseling is an effective approach and opens up new possibilities and new concepts in a person's life. A person can begin to concern himself, for example, with the little understood endocrine gland system, or the transference of energy which occurs between individuals during meditation and prayer. He can also begin to pay attention to dreams and their tremendous possibilities for healing and growth. Different people are moved to take practical steps in different ways, and these readings contain a wealth of suggestions. Do the readings contain unknown information? No, that's not the point. It's not what people know or don't know that counts, it's what they apply of what they know. This is what makes the difference in counseling. It's no great problem to get people to think about something, but it's something else to get them to move, to do something that will break into and change the pattern of their lives. The EDGAR CAYCE data is useful, especially for this reason, as a source of leverage to get people moving and experimenting. There are all kinds of exercises in the readings that can help people extend and gain control of their states of consciousness. The body is an integral part of the whole person. The readings talked about the very cells of the body having minds of their own, and this is real. You have to get them involved, too, if you're going to change habit patterns. Then, there's diet, another area about which there is a vast amount of data in the readings. But don't let me get started, let me sum it up instead. If you can inspire people to move, to try something, to begin to do something with themselves, if you can introduce momentum into the system, you can then begin to get them to change by giving direction to that momentum. In our way of counseling, it's the application that makes the difference. And this emphasis upon application comes out of the EDGAR CAYCE readings. You have mentioned prayer. Could you say something about that? In the readings, prayer and meditation are of equal importance. Like two hands, you need both hands to lift a table. The readings define prayer as a conscious effort of the mind to relate to the highest that a person can conceive of as a divine energy or power. This energy can be spoken of as God, but we have people of all faiths and religions who are concerned with a broad concept of divinity. For us, prayer is like a direction of energy, and it is, at the same time, the energy itself. It is impersonal, blanketing a person or situation. In the imagination, it appears as a kind of impersonal light that becomes a way of protection, healing, and health. If you wind a wire tightly around a piece of metal, you build up a magnetic field. In an analogous way, if a group of persons is praying together, if each is held up successively in light, in love, in friendliness, in warmth, or in concern, however they express it, there seems to be a kind of nonverbal exchange of energy, and an invoking of a higher energy which protects and heals. People have come out of such groups saying, "I've been able to face, and to get rid of things I didn't even know I had." My only problem with this is in characterizing it as impersonal. Oh, yes, reasonably impersonal, in the sense that light is impersonal. The rather numerous and specific instructions in the readings for prayer advise us not to particularize. We don't always know what's best for an individual. A blessing, a loving, a caring, a concern, a surrounding with light would constitute the impersonal way of prayer. That's what I'm saying here. You spoke of prayer and meditation as two hands. Let's turn to meditation now. I was reading in the Time magazine cover story on meditation that 30,000 Americans sign up each month for transcendental meditation, and the history of meditation is very short in this country. I suppose that 50 years ago most Americans would have pooh-poohed any such idea. But now it's become one of the most talked about and practiced. For me, one of the tragedies of our Protestant tradition is our de-emphasizing the interior disciplines. We wave flags, march in Alabama and welcome Vietnamese into our communities, but we seem to have given up inner work with ourselves. All the more remarkable that meditation has come in with such power and force today. People need it, have to have it. In my opinion, meditation is as important as breathing. Given the world conditions we live in today, the tension, the noise, the pressure, the bad foods, the poisons we breathe, you meditate or you come apart. There has to be a way interior enough to awaken a sense of knowing within, enough to make some choices. Meditation's great function is this: it sensitizes the individual enough to his own inner desires, values or ideals so that he can make choices that will mean fresher life, greater creativity, a deeper capacity to love, and newer ways of serving. It renews that orientation to life, which enables us to neutralize the pressures that tend to make our life experiences meaningless. We've got to choose the right foods. We've got to choose which experiences we will give ourselves to. We've got to choose healthy patterns of thinking, and decide to give up reading junk which fills our minds with fear, confusion and bewilderment. We have to exercise our capacity to make creative and constructive choices. The strengthening, nourishing and maturing of the will is one outstanding result of meditative practice. Just the sheer business of doing it guarantees that. One of the outstanding advertisements for meditation occurred not long ago on TV, when Arthur Ashe and Jimmy Connors were playing a championship tennis match. While they were resting between sets, Connors was shown drinking, moving, talking, very active. But Ashe was shown alone, quietly meditating. His eyes were closed, his body was relaxed. And each time, he got up and wailed the daylights out of Connors, the top man in tennis. Arthur Ashe never should have beaten that man. Of course, the meditation wasn't all of it. No, but it was significant. It was certainly significant for the public, for young people, who watched it and said to themselves, "Hey, look at that guy. I wonder, if I were able to relax, to get quiet, to get a hold of myself, could I get my job done at the point of stress, like he is doing?" The whole elaborate meditative technique given in the Edgar Cayce readings is apparently designed to quicken man's spiritual nature. The principal difference between this system, and it is quite elaborately worked out, and other approaches is the relentless focus on the spiritual goals of meditation. It's not just a mechanical procedure for inducing psychological stillness. This is done by first establishing spiritual goals, spiritual ideals, spiritual purposes, and these are stated in what Cayce called affirmations. These affirmations are peculiarly phrased, they are stated in strange language, but their regular use is doing remarkable things for thousands and thousands of people all over the world. The use of these affirmations seems to be producing a new orientation toward the purpose of life. They move a person to ask, why am I here? What can I do and where am I going? What's going to happen to me? It's a whole new look at the purpose of existence. As the soul begins to awaken, begins to become the master in the house rather than the servant, it takes over, and the life becomes purposeful in terms of a spiritual goal. The meditator focuses upon a statement, such as, let me ever be a channel of blessings, or, as we seek to see and know thy face, may we each, as individuals and as a group, come to know ourselves even as we are known. And then he goes on, that we as lights in thee may give the better concept of the spirit in this earth. So it is a movement from where we are presently to a new state of consciousness, a new position, a new attitude toward our everyday affairs. Finally, this affects how we apply practically what we know in our lives. If you persist in this daily, and if you discuss these ideas with a group of people every week, which is the whole thrust of our ARE study group approach, the soul self begins to awaken, and there develops a new direction, a new purpose, a new goal for one's life. I'd like to emphasize here that service is the master activity or motive of life as presented in the Cayce readings, service to others. This is inherent in that first affirmation I quoted, let me ever be a channel of blessings, today, now, to those that I contact in every way. This affirmation heads the first chapter entitled Cooperation, of our ARE study group book, A Search for God. And this means cooperation with God, cooperation with the spiritual power of the universe, cooperation with the best that is in our fellow man, the God in the fellow man. So in this affirmation you are asking for the master power to flow through you in your daily affairs. Through us to everyone we contact in every way. The affirmation makes us more aware of the everyday, practical, step-by-step opportunities that are open. And people begin to see new opportunities, new ways of serving and of being more creative and healing. Well, this is wonderful, the idea that the purpose of waking up the spirit is to put spirit in charge of choice-making. Thomas Sugru stated this very beautifully in a book called Stranger in the Earth. He said that our purpose is to help God bring creation to flower. It's a participation in the creation that is going on in the whole universe. Someone else expressed this a little differently, that every human being is in a responsible relationship to the universe itself, and we either contribute to or detract from its overall harmony. This same person speaks of natural man as being mechanical and asleep, but nevertheless having a potential for awakening to a higher spiritual state of being. This thread runs all through the EDGAR CAYCE readings, tied securely to such practical ideas as meditation, group work, and self-observation. Many areas for self-observation are recommended in the readings. The changes we make in diet, exercise, in mental attitudes, and so forth, all pointing toward the awakening, the creativity, the service of which man is capable. Could you talk a bit now about the stages of meditation? But first, how would you define meditation? I would define it, of course, in the terms of the EDGAR CAYCE readings. They say first, that meditation is an alignment of the body and conscious mind with the spiritual purposes of the soul, further, that it is a way of cleansing, of purging all that hinders the flow of energy in the body from the lower to the higher centers, where it can awaken the higher consciousness. Now, if you stop and think about it for a minute, the average man spends most of his time and strength using up this one energy that he has, by thrusting it outward, whether it be in sex, in anger, in fear, in the drive to get things done, or in gushiness toward surrounding people, the casual friendliness type of thing. But the idea in meditation is to turn the energy inward and allow it to move directly to the higher spiritual centers, the pineal and the pituitary, where there's memory of who we really are. Some awakening then occurs. I'm talking in a very practical fashion now, too. But this is beyond most people, they haven't thought in this way. It may be beyond them at a conscious level, but if they do it, it happens to them, and so they begin to think in a different pattern. They begin to see themselves as having a part in the grand design. That's one of the most exciting things that can ever happen to a person, to suddenly realize that he is indeed a child of God, that he is indeed a spiritual being, capable of some of the things he reads and dreams about. And that awakening is possible through meditation, through the actual movement of energy to the memory cells of the soul itself. You might call this the coming of the Holy Spirit. I talk about it as a meeting of energies. My conception of it goes like this. A person in meditation allows his creative energy to move upward to where it meets an energy coming in from the outside. These energies meet at the pineal level and spill over into the pituitary. This is a phenomenon that is symbolized in every major religion of the world. It is described in the Old Testament as "my cup runneth over." Then the psalmist goes on to say, "Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Then you see the cup overflowing as a symbol of opening oneself to a higher state of consciousness. Let's talk now about stages of meditation. Where does a person begin? Where is this energy found, and how is it directed upward? First of all, a person already has the energy. Meditation is simply learning to direct it, to govern it. The meditation begins very simply with the person setting aside 10 to 15 minutes every day and finding a place where he can get his body quiet. Then he begins to quiet his conscious mind and eliminate the flow of pictures from his unconscious. There are 3 steps to this. The body will get quiet fairly quickly if you persist. It will relax. But it will kick up every now and then like a bucking horse. It doesn't want you to direct attention away from it. You begin to sense that the chair is getting terribly hard. Or you become aware that if you don't have a drink of water you'll die of thirst. Or you'll itch in places where you never itched before. The body needs to get quiet first, but you must be tolerant and patient with it. Then there are the patterns of the mind. The conscious mind jumps and flits like a squirrel in a cage. Many people have great difficulty with this. They chase the mind and spend 15 minutes just trying to catch up with it. You'll begin to remember things you haven't remembered in a long time, such as where you lost the extra car keys you've been looking for, and so on. All kinds of distracting things begin to occur in the mind. It needs to get quiet, too. And then, along with all of this, comes this flow of pictures from the subconscious mind. Many people, confused at this point, think that this is meditation, because the scenes are so beautiful. It's like a television show. You turn it on, and there it is. You could sit there and watch this show for the next 5 hours and never tire. This flow of faces, pictures, colors and patterns is out of the unconscious. And this, too, must stop. At this point one must persist. Suppose you have reached a point of relative quiet. Next you deliberately take an affirmation, or Bible verse and hold it before your mind. That sounds like what you do with a mantra in transcendental meditation. That's right. And you use it in just the same way. Every time the body kicks, or the pictures flow, or the mind flits, you restore the peace by bringing your attention back to the affirmation. You don't fuss, you don't fight, you just refocus your attention. And gradually everything becomes stiller and quieter. If you persist in this, your energies then, because you are holding a spiritual ideal, a spiritual purpose, because you are asking to be a channel of blessings to those you meet day by day. That's what the affirmation is, a spiritual ideal. A spiritual ideal stated in affirmation form. Hence when you hold it in mind during meditation, even though you don't experience any special light, or great revelation, or sudden illumination or vision, your life begins to change. You begin to see opportunities for service. Your practical affairs begin to come into balance, into focus. You are actually beginning to awaken the spiritual self, and it begins to dominate and take over. Now, there may come periods of illumination, periods of stillness, periods of light that are so beautiful that you would crawl all the way across a state to get back to that moment of consciousness, because it was so peaceful, so good. So you keep looking for it, keep searching. There are such ecstasies of the mind and of the body, but most of us have little or no experience of spiritual ecstasy. It's not so remote as all that. To certain young couples I have said, take your physical intercourse, the ecstasy of the body in orgasm. All right, now try, just experiment with meditation before having intercourse, and there isn't any comparison. It changes the whole attitude, the whole purpose and course of the relationship. And it's one of the quickest ways I know to bring sexual compatibility between two people. Fascinating. If they will pray for each other, if they will meditate together and prepare for this experience of bodily, physical ecstasy, it will change their whole experience. What you are saying is that if this spiritual part of a person can be awakened, it can enhance, elevate, and open up other levels of existence. Every part of the body and the mind. Okay. I'm going to ask some more abstract questions now. What is the function of meditation in the operation of grace? You were talking about this energy that comes down and meets. We'll have to begin by defining some terms. Now grace, as I understand it, is the expression of God's love for man, love which is unearned. Man doesn't do anything, can't do anything, to merit it. God's love pours itself out on man, and I happen to believe that He's doing this all the time, as He does with the sunshine and the rain. But man doesn't recognize it. He can't accept it because he can't love himself. Therefore, he can't accept God's love. In my opinion, meditation helps man to become conscious of God's love for him. How? You remember Michelangelo's painting on the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Those hands of Adam and God reaching to touch. This is a mutual operation, not just one way or the other. God reaches for man and man reaches for God. Now, in meditation, man becomes aware of God's reaching, of God's love for him. How? In very practical ways. He begins to experience this love in his life. Many people call it being born again, being saved. The great initiates, the great meditators of all time, the Carmelites, Saint John of the Cross, Saint Teresa of Avila, had experiences of illumination. Did you know Bill Wilson? The one who started Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes. I understand he was in the hospital coming out of a big bout with alcohol. He was reading a passage on mysticism in James' Varieties of Religious Experience, when the room suddenly filled with light, and he had an experience of ecstasy. In a sense, Alcoholics Anonymous was born in that experience. In such an experience of higher spiritual consciousness, a man begins to be able to share God's love. Sounds to me as though some sort of electrical connection is made. And there's light. You know, if this room were dark, and we had the plug for a lamp in our hands, we could stumble around in here for a long time trying to push it in somewhere. That's the body and mind level. Right? But when we make a connection, we get light. Now, in meditation, this energy, this current begins to flow through us, but not for our own use alone. Like a light, it's not just for our own satisfaction, but in terms of healing, in terms of creativity, in terms of service, it brings a greater capacity and willingness to serve, new insights into how to be of service. It supplies new energy we can use to push on, to get things done. I hear you saying that the spirit of a man is where meaning is. It's where life is. And that when we get in touch with the spiritual part of ourselves, it gives meaning to the rest. Yes, to the body, to the mind, to every experience of our life. Has meditation a function in melting our defenses, our panics? As we move to a higher state of consciousness, we are no longer using the energies through the bodily centers, where we have stored the panics, the fears, the prejudices and hates, and so, as the energy moves up, these centers are left without nourishment. Then, when the transformed energy flows back down, it heals them. Milarepa, the great sage of the Himalayas, speaks of melted ivory flowing back down to heal like heavenly ambrosia, feeding the lower centers of the body. Before this energy begins to flow back down, it has touched the God consciousness, the energy from outside. God's love has become available, and so the energy heals, it wipes away our hates, our prejudices, our fears. The things that were our weaknesses are transformed. This begins with the simple little everyday irritations, annoyances and fears, and moves on to the big things that we've been holding onto for a long time. A picture comes into my mind. The novelist Robert Reynolds wrote a number of bestsellers, among them a book called The Sinner of St. Ambrose. In a remarkable passage near the end, his main character has an encounter with the divine child, the spiritual life pattern, which had always lived in the depths of his soul. You know, Dad talked about it as the Christ consciousness imprinted on the spiritual mind of every soul, and only needing to be awakened by the will. And when it's awakened, it's still intact, that's the beautiful thing. All those experiences of growing up do not harm, or destroy the divine child, the Christ consciousness within. It remains hidden in the spirit. But when it is contacted, and we have to make a deliberate, conscious and considerable effort to reach out and contact it through meditation, or prayer, or some such means, then it comes back into the life and transforms it. Is that what you are saying? Sure. It transforms the everyday life of a person and enables him to be less irritable, more patient, kinder, more creative and more healing, and gives him a greater capacity for service. The whole world changes for him. Such a person knows where he is going. He knows of what he is a part, and begins to move toward home. I'd like to move now to the final thing I have to say, and I think this is important for us both. I want to do some sort of tie-in with the church. First of all, what is your own connection with the church, and what has it been over the years? From childhood my father and mother were involved in church work. As a child I was a member of a Disciples of Christ church in Selma, Alabama. Then later, when we moved to Virginia Beach, there was no Disciples church, and we all joined the Presbyterian church. I've been in it ever since. I taught Sunday school there for 15 years. I have been an officer in the church, both deacon and elder. I have maintained a relationship with that same church for over 25 years. Are you still a member? I'm still a member, I still attend and I'm still active. Let me tell you something important about myself. My concern in this life is not with ARE and not with Edgar Cayce, but with Jesus. I serve him. The Edgar Cayce readings give me tools to carry out his work, to touch people's lives. I think this was my father's purpose too, really. He was a deeply religious man. But for me, I work in the earth for the Master. I am committed to that. ARE is just a vehicle, a way, in which I can better fulfill this purpose that I find in my life, doing what he told me to do. He said, love one another. I find that ARE provides many ways of doing this. The Edgar Cayce material suggests many ways of expressing love for one's fellow man, in terms of group work, healing, speaking, counseling and helping people to look at themselves more completely. Jesus taught this, he said, go do it, and I'm trying to go do it. ARE is the vehicle I know and use. I see that. I see it in the ARE work and I'm glad. I don't go about preaching Jesus, but I have introduced my friend to many people, and will continue to do so all of my life. After that, another question seems anticlimactic, but this one has troubled some. It's this: for many Protestants, salvation comes in a conversionist model, a sudden striking, like a bolt of lightning. In many of the conservative denominations, this is the picture in their minds of what it's like to be saved. But the ARE model seems to entail a slow, careful, even painful growth toward wholeness. I think it's not so much a growth, as it is a realization. We're already there, but the self is in the way. And so the process is one of removal. I call it a dance of the 7 veils. Wonderful. Say more. It's a removal of the blocks we have created. It's a realization of God's love and of His caring. It's a new understanding of ourselves as spiritual entities, beings capable of having a part in His whole plan. It isn't a self-development class. The focus is not on self-development. The focus is on getting rid of self. The focus is on the removal of the blocks in self, and on seeing God clearly. And seeing His love. Yes. It's a matter of experiencing His love and then being able to share it with others. Sadhguru says that when we come to this realization of having a hand in the hand of God, the realization that He cares, that He loves us, that we're part of His plan, His program, then we must reach out and put our arm around a friend. This is the service, the sharing. So it's a realization. It's a new state of consciousness, a state of consciousness raised to a spiritual level.